All right, guys, this is Miss Rhodes with your test number 2 Bellwork review. Remember that you also have Kahoots, you have lots of videos, you have all of your notes, the PowerPoints, the review topics PowerPoint, and lots of other resources to study. There will be some questions from the first test, like some from the topics from the first test, because Units 1 and 2, covering the years 1200 to 1450, overlapped through Unit 1 and 2. So all of the events are intermingled and interconnected. So I'm going to go over the Bellwork here. You have lots of other options to review, and the Kahoots are really great, but they will not cover everything. This is not going to cover everything. You always have to make sure that you look at the review topics. Make sure you just study all of your stuff. Remember that AP is all about connections and patterns. It's not always about memorizing, small details. All right, here we go with your Bellwork review. All right, first one. What major empires or cultures influenced Southeast Asia's development? Okay, so you're going to have on the western side, you're going to have Hindu religion from South Asia or India, and Confucian and Buddhist influence from East Asia, which is China. What staple crop helped Southeast Asia's population to grow so large? Rice. Okay, this entire region of East and Southeast Asia is going to be rice-based economies. Why are the Malay Peninsula and the Strait of Malacca important? This is the Malay Peninsula. It is now the home of the country of Malaysia, and this is the Strait of Malacca that squeezes through here. This is the island of Sumatra, and it is this region is super important because this is the fastest route to connect India and Africa and the Indian Ocean, which would be right here, with the South China Sea and the Chinese coast. Okay, this is the best and safest, that's kind of the most important way, the safest and fastest way to travel through here. And so we have several empires that grow here, the Srivijaya, the Funan, and then the Chola come and take over from South Asia, and so this territory remains important. Eventually, in the next time period, when the Europeans finally show up, they're also going to realize that this is super important and they're going to try to control it. So remember that. What was the first Southeast Asian civilization, like large civilization? That would be Funan. It was bypassed when the trade routes went around it. What makes salt so valuable? You actually have to have it to live. What characteristics do the African and Asian tropics have in common? Warm climates had to adapt to their environment in order to farm. Unequal distribution of rainfall led them to create water control systems like aqueducts and reservoirs. Less gender inequality than other areas in this time period. Less gender inequality, so it's not as harsh on women. All right, and then describe the importance of the Swahili Coast. The Swahili Coast is the eastern coast of sub-Saharan Africa, and there are independent city-states there that are a major and important part of the Indian Ocean trade network, and they brought goods from Central and West Africa to the coast to enter into maritime trade. All right. The Indian Ocean trading network tended to be very cooperative. What united the people from China, Southeast Asia, India, the islands, the Swahili Coast? What kept all these people together? Trade, commercial interests, money. Fighting is bad for business. Okay, John Green says this in his videos if you watched it, but that's kind of the thing. Everybody was cooperative because everybody was trying to make some money and make things move. All right, what religion was spread through trade to Srivijaya and left a mark on their history? This was from the article from Khan Academy you were supposed to read, and the answer is Buddhism. And the evidence for that is because of all the stupas or Buddhist temples that are throughout the region. The next one, what led to the downfall of Srivijaya? This is also from that article. The small nation of Chola in South Asia, was at the very tip of India at the time, took control of the Strait of Malacca, and because of their dominance there, they became the dominant power in the region. What types of water control systems were used in the tropic region, and why was this important? Aqueducts, reservoirs, both large public works projects and small local systems. Small local systems are going to last longer because large systems can be hurt by natural disasters like hurricanes or earthquakes. They also are harder to keep up. They cost a lot more money. Small local systems are easier to repair. All right, what languages are blended to make up Swahili? Bantu and Arabic are the main ones, but there's also some Persian influence. What major trade item was acquired from Great Zimbabwe? The major one is gold. Are they bringing some other stuff from Central Africa? Of course they are. Tropical animals and ivory and all these other things that they acquired from other people, but their main trade item was gold. What was the only domesticated beast of burden in the Americas? A beast of burden is not something you eat. It's something that helps you work. It carries things or it pulls things. So in the Americas, the only one really is the llama. They do have alpaca, but the alpaca are even weaker than the llama. Llama can only carry about 100 pounds, and a fully fit human who works out normally can carry much more than 100 pounds. So in these areas, llama and alpaca were the best they had, but definitely not equal to anything in Afro-Eurasia. Like oxen, horses, donkeys, anything like that could do work. All right, the next one, describe the Mayan view of the universe. They believed it was 3 layers, that the gods lived in the sky, the humans in the middle here on earth, and the dead were in the underworld. You can kind of compare this back to ancient Greece and their mythology. There's also some myths that have to do, there's some story in the Mayan view about a tree growing through that as well, if you want to get really detailed. All right, what did the Maya have in common with Greece? Also, obviously, we just mentioned their the belief in the underworld and the gods in the sky and all of that. But what we were looking for here was their city-state organization, independent city-states that sometimes worked together and had similar cultures, but most of the time were not an independent nation. Again, I repeat that. With ancient Greece, it was not a organized empire or anything. Neither were the Maya. All right, the next one, what are chinampas? They were, like, for a loose description, floating gardens for areas where there was too much water to protect the plants, and it made year-round agriculture possible and allowed for more food to be produced, and more food will always mean more people. What interesting stone structures were the Olmecs famous for? The giant heads. See the PowerPoint if you'd like to see a picture. What cultures are part of the mound building culture? The major ones that we talked about were the Mississippian and the Hopewell. What governmental organization or system is used in the mound building cultures? They use chiefdoms, which can be compared back to like the Celts. Name and describe the Andean labor system. So I'm sorry, I forgot to put the name in there. It's called the MITA system. MITA''A. All right. All right. I apologize. Each clan had to provide labor for the government for a certain amount of time each year. They could be put to work building or repairing roads, temples, government buildings, water control systems, or they could be used as porters, which means they would carry these giant like baskets on their back and stuff to move things for trade because they didn't have a beast of burden. All right, describe the dwellings of the Anasazi. These are called kivas, and they're cliff dwellings. They're the ones who built their city kind of under the cliffs. What is chunky? And this is a Mississippian game or a sport. You can look it up. The reason I brought that up is because there was a question that we went over on the quiz about how that compares to Greece and the Olympics, and it has to do with competition and sports and how that is linked to politics. City-states or chiefdoms or groups competing against each other for status and power, and that continues where we still compete in like the Olympics. What are some things that early American cultures have in common with Afro-Eurasia, and what are some things that are drastically different? One, patriarchy. Pretty much everyone we've talked about so far is male-dominated. and they appear in all of them, but the degree of female subjugation is drastically different. Native American women had much more freedom. Some of the sub-Saharan African areas had much more freedom. The Celts would have had much more freedom, but the more organized the empire, the more agricultural, the bigger, the less power women had. China with the foot binding, India with the sati or the widow burning, in Europe, women being married off as pawns in politics, any of that. All right, the next one is animal domestication. Afro-Eurasia has the advantage here for sure. They had tons more animals, horses, cows, pigs, oxen, lots of things that the Americans don't. And then hereditary leadership is the norm in most of these societies, from best we can tell. Some of them we don't have a 100% accuracy on that because we don't have any records, but most of them we can tell they're hereditary leadership. So these are only a few of the examples you could come up with, similarities and differences. Remember that the idea in AP is to find connections and patterns and be able to compare and contrast. All right, in medieval Europe, the primary centers for agricultural production were manors. Okay, so the manor system, remember they're self-sufficient little farming estates. All right, the end of Anglo-Saxon domination in England came in the late 11th century in 1066 when William, the Duke of Normandy, invaded and brought feudalism and French language into a new English court. Okay, this is called the Norman invasion. There's a great silly song posted on Schoology. What military technology is associated with knights? Swords, chainmail, which is new, armor, saddles, stirrups. All of this is very expensive. All of it makes it easier to fight from horseback, and it was all reserved only for knights. People who were not of noble birth could not wear it. Describe the different roles of monasteries in Western Europe. They could be inns, orphanages, a place for women who are seeking to escape poverty or unwanted arranged marriages to become nuns, even men too, to escape poverty and stuff or to find an education, could become a monk. Often the only opportunity for education. They were the preservers of knowledge and learning, and they often copied books, mostly the Bible, of course, but lots of other books as well. Next, how did these groups view the Crusades differently? Religious leaders, peasants, and kings. Religious leaders saw this as a way to inspire loyalty to the church instead of the kings and to win land they believed belonged to them. Peasants thought it would help them earn a place in heaven, and they were just doing what that took. And kings saw it as a way to hurt their competition in trade and power and also gain glory for their nations. The last one lists at least two major social changes that occurred because of the Black Death. The end of serfdom, the freeing of the peasantry in Europe, in Western Europe, not in Eastern Europe or in Russia, and a rise in wages, like average wages, pay, right, and loss of population, of course. All right, what were some signs that Europe was recovering from the Dark Age by 1200? Rising population, rising trade, and reappearance of coins, which has to do with economics as well. But remember that a Dark Age is a loss of population, loss of cities, loss of learning, lots of trade, isolation, all of that. And so recovery will be the opposite. What new farming techniques helped European population grow in the late Middle Ages? The three-field system, mold-bore plow, the horse collar, which pulls the weight off of a horse's neck and onto its shoulders, and cultivating oats, because oats are healthier than regular wheat. The next, what is a serf? It is a peasant bound to the land during the Middle Ages, also seen in feudal Japan. What is a fief? It is a grant of land given with the promise of military service in return. A fief or a fiefdom would be given from the king to lords, like major lords, dukes, barons, earls, things like that. And then they would give it to knights in return for their military service, and then the peasants would work the land for the knights. Sometimes there was more layers than that. The baron may give it to some lords, and then the lords gave it to other lords, and then it went down to the knights. But that's the basic concept. The short description of feudalism is on the next slide. There's a nice pyramid that also helps with the fief explanation. The next one, what city is the center of Catholicism in the Middle Ages? That would be Rome. That's where the Pope lives. Now, there is some sidetracking because, like, France decides that they're going to choose the Pope and they move into Avignon, France. That doesn't work out. Then there's two popes and it's very complicated. But in general, the center of Catholicism is in Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. It continues to be. That is where the Pope lives. Actually, technically, Basically, he lives in Vatican City, which is a separate and independent sovereign state, but it is, in the location of Rome. All right, so European feudalism is a pyramid structure, right, with the king at the top, then the nobles, then the knights, and then the peasants. So nobles and knights and royalty, kings and queens, all have to do with bloodlines. You have to be related. You have to have a certain bloodline. They think their blood is better. It's, extremely, biased and they're just very strict about those rules. Then the peasantry do all the work, of course. So the way that this works is the king has a country. He will split that country into 4, 5, or 6 regions that he gives to barons, dukes, earls, viscounts, all of these high-level nobles. Sometimes then the nobles would give those high-level nobles would split their pieces up into smaller pieces and give them to Lord so-and-so. That would be their title. They didn't have a specific title. And then it could go down to the knights. It would be split up among the knights. The knights would be Sir so-and-so as their title. And then the peasants would work the land in the manors, and then they would give their food to the knights and the nobles and the king. And in return, they got protection from all the attacks from other lords or from Vikings or from anybody else who tried to invade. So this is all about mutual benefit and mutual relationships. The problem is if you split your power as the king into 5 pieces and then they split it up more and then the people below them split them up more and the peasants never see the king, all they ever see is the lord that they're used to, the king has less power than he seems. Okay, and you can see that in the construction of castles and stuff in Middle Ages versus Renaissance. They have much smaller castles, darker castles. Same thing with clothes. They're not going to be as impressive as they will be later. Art is not impressive because there's just no money. Remember that they're in a dark age. All right, comparisons across regions and in our major time period. So this is the stuff I'm looking for. You're looking for patterns and comparisons. Which religions use monasticism? Okay, becoming monks and nuns and becoming orphanages and inns and taking care of people. Buddhism and Christianity. Okay, they both have that in common. Which empires were clearly centralized? Okay, governments that the king actually has a lot of power and controls the people. Rome, or later the Byzantine Empire, was centralized. China is centralized. The Islamic caliphates are centralized. Okay, which empires had more decentralized or local governments? The feudal systems, Western Europe, Japan, also the city-states of the Maya and stuff, were all decentralized governments. And India is a unique case. India has a pattern. They were very decentralized, then they were centralized by the Gupta and the Mauryan. Then they were decentralized again. Then they were centralized by the Delhi Sultanate, the Islamic Empire. Then they kind of fragmented. Then they have the Mughal Empire, which we're going to get to soon. They have kind of a pattern going back and forth. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for. All right, where are the following farming techniques used? Terrace farming was used in the Andean, South American regions with the Inca and possibly a couple of the smaller civilizations before the Inca, and also in India. Mountainous, you cut a nice shelf into the land, make it flat. The 3-field system was used in Europe. Chinampas, the floating gardens, were used in Mesoamerica, and the moldboard plow was used in Western Europe. These are just some examples. You can go back and find some more. All right, the last one was for you to choose one important traveler, Ibn Battuta, Marco Polo, or Mansa Musa, and discuss the effect of his travels. Okay, so all of these guys went on really big travels. Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo wrote books about their adventures, and Mansa Musa brought a ton of information and knowledge back from the Middle East. Okay, so something that Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo have in common is that they were not royalty and that they brought knowledge of the outside world back home. Mansa Musa is royalty. He's a king, and he causes a bunch of inflation. Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo don't. Something Ibn Battuta and Mansa Musa have in common, they're both Muslim. Marco Polo is not. Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo both visit China. Mansa Musa does not. Okay, Mansa Musa is going on a religious trip. Ibn Battuta started out as a religious trip and then kept going. Marco Polo has nothing to do with religion. So there's lots of things you can talk about, their effects of their travels. They bring back knowledge. They open up the the wider world to their culture. Mansa Musa actually brings more attention to his own culture. Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo bring knowledge to their culture of other cultures. So there's lots of things you could talk about here. The idea is that there's lots of people you can research and you can find out about. If you want to find another traveler, a female, a Catholic nun that is interesting, you can look up Marjorie Kemp. I can't remember how to spell her name. Anyway, she is another example of a major traveler. You can look her up, Catholic nun, Middle Ages, traveler. I will put that on a update sometime, but you can check her out as well. But you want to look at these travelers and be able to compare and contrast. And I'm sorry I was kind of rambling at the end with Marjorie Kemp, but I hope this helped, and I hope you guys will do well on your test tomorrow. Good luck.